When you dial 911, you expect help to arrive, but sometimes these emergency calls lead to mysteries that haunt investigators for decades. Some callers vanish without a trace. Others report situations so bizarre that nobody can explain what really happened. Today, we're diving into 3 real 911 calls that still don't make sense, even years later. These aren't creepypasta stories or urban legends. These are actual cases with real victims, real families searching for answers, and recordings that continue to baffle experts. Fair warning, some of this content is disturbing, but if you're ready, let's get into it. Our first case takes us to a desolate stretch of Highway 277 in rural Texas. It's August 8, 2013, around 11:30 at night. Brandon Lawson, a 26-year-old oil field worker and father of 4, has just had an argument with his girlfriend, Ladessa. He storms out of their San Angelo home and calls his father, telling him he's driving the 3 hours to Crowley, Texas to stay with him for a while. Brandon seems determined to leave. He's angry, he's upset, but he's functional. He's making a plan. What nobody knows yet is that Brandon will never make it to his father's house. In fact, Brandon will never be seen alive again. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Brandon calls his brother Kyle with bad news. His Ford F-150 has run out of gas on Highway 277, about 4 miles south of the tiny town of Bronte. The area is pitch black, surrounded by nothing but empty fields and the occasional oil rig. Kyle tells him he'll be right there with a gas can. It should be a simple rescue mission. But then at 12:50 a.m., Brandon makes another call. This one goes to 911, and this is where everything becomes inexplicable. The call is answered by a dispatcher at a nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas. The audio quality is poor, plagued by static and what sounds like a bad cell phone connection. But it's not just the technical issues that make this call disturbing. It's what Brandon is saying, or rather, what people think he's saying. It's been analyzed thousands of times by internet sleuths, audio experts, and law enforcement, and yet there's still no consensus on what Brandon is actually saying. Let me walk you through what we know for certain. Brandon identifies his location as Highway 277 heading toward Abilene. He confirms his truck ran out of gas, but then things get confusing. He mentions being in the middle of a field. He references other people, other cars. He says something about the woods. He sounds out of breath, panicked, desperate. Different transcripts offer wildly different interpretations. Some people hear him say pushed some guys over. Others hear pushed some cars over. Some think he says they took it through the woods, referring to something unidentified. A few claim to hear gunshots in the background, though this is heavily disputed. Kyle arrives at Brandon's truck around 1:10 a.m. A sheriff's deputy is already there because a passing motorist had called about an abandoned vehicle partially blocking the road. But Brandon is nowhere to be found. His truck is there, the keys are gone, his phone is gone. Brandon has vanished. What makes this even stranger is that Kyle was actually on the phone with Brandon when he arrived at the scene. Brandon told him, "I can see you, I'm right here," but neither Kyle nor the deputy could see Brandon anywhere. Kyle assumed Brandon was hiding because he had outstanding warrants. After waiting 30 to 45 minutes, Kyle left. At around 1:18 a.m., Kyle called Brandon again. This time, Brandon sounded out of breath and said he was bleeding. Then the call cut out. That was the last anyone heard from him. Search efforts began immediately, but they found nothing. The sheriff's department concluded that Brandon had left the area, possibly to avoid arrest. They claimed he'd cashed out his 401k a week before disappearing, suggesting he planned to run away. But Brandon's family pointed out he was simply switching jobs, which would explain the 401k withdrawal. For years, the case went cold. The 911 call became infamous online, spawned countless theories. Was Brandon on drugs? He had struggled with methamphetamine in the past. His brother later confirmed he'd relapsed shortly before that night. Could that explain the confusion in his call? Or was something more sinister happening? Some theories suggested Brandon witnessed a crime and was fleeing from dangerous people. Others proposed he accidentally hit someone with his truck and was being chased by angry witnesses. A few even speculated law enforcement involvement, pointing to inconsistencies in the investigation. Then, in February 2022, nearly 9 years after Brandon's disappearance, searchers found human remains in the area where his truck had been abandoned. The remains were less than a mile from where Brandon ran out of gas. DNA testing took over 2 years, but in late 2024, the remains were officially confirmed to be Brandon Lawson. His body was finally returned to his family in July 2025, over 11 years after that desperate 911 call. A public memorial was held in August. But the mystery isn't solved. How did Brandon die? What was he running from that night? Who were the people he mentioned in his call? Why couldn't anyone find him during the initial search when he was so close to his truck? The 911 call remains as incomprehensible as ever. Every few months, someone claims they've finally deciphered what Brandon was saying, but law enforcement has never confirmed any interpretation. The official cause of death hasn't been released. The case is technically closed in terms of finding Brandon, but it's far from explained. Brandon's girlfriend, Ladessa, has stated she believes there was no foul play, that Brandon likely died from exposure or his drug use. But many people, including some of Brandon's family members, aren't convinced. They point to the panic in his voice, his claim he was bleeding, his insistence that he needed police immediately. What's perhaps most haunting is this. Brandon was on the phone describing his emergency to 911, and he was still alive when help arrived at his truck. If the dispatcher had understood his location or the nature of his emergency, could he have been saved? We'll never know. But that 911 call, barely a minute long, stands as a permanent record of a man's final desperate moments, and nobody can agree on what he was trying to say. He called 911, then he hung up, and for 30 years, he never spoke again. October 28, 1991, Wheeling, Illinois, 11:31 a.m. A man stands at a payphone outside a liquor store. His voice is rushed, nervous. Send an ambulance or police to 1765 Stonehenge Court. There's a young woman inside. She's not breathing. She's turning blue. The dispatcher asks questions. The man repeats the address. She mispronounces the street. He corrects her. Stonehenge. He does not give his name. He does not say how he knows. He does not say when he was there. He says one word. Bye. The line goes dead. 5 minutes later, paramedics arrive. The door is closed but unlocked. Inside the bedroom, 27-year-old Jaime Santos lies on the floor. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, nothing disturbed. She's rushed to the hospital. Too late. The autopsy shows suffocation, likely a pillow over her face. No drugs, no sexual assault. Police believe one thing immediately. Jaime knew her killer. Jaime lived 2 lives. At home, she was private and careful. At work, she was known as Sasha, an exotic dancer. She never gave out her real name, never dated clients, never mixed work with her real life. So when police find no forced entry, the question becomes simple. Who did she trust? Over 100 people are interviewed. 15 take lie detector tests. The FBI joins the case. Nothing sticks. But the 911 call never leaves investigators' minds. The caller knew her exact address, knew the correct street name, knew she wasn't breathing, knew she was turning blue. Details only someone inside the apartment would know. Surveillance shows a man near the payphone. He's investigated, cleared. Years pass. Police publicly say the caller is not a suspect. They beg him to come forward, even anonymously. He never does. If he was innocent, why disappear? If he was guilty, why call for help at all? The call is played on national television, then released online years later. Millions hear it. No one comes forward. Today, the case remains unsolved. Jaime Santos was killed in her own home. Someone she trusted was likely there, and one man made a call that holds the answers. A recording less than 1 minute long, a voice that knows the truth, and silence that has lasted over 30 years. Will it ever end?